I started week 4 with another change of plans. Over dinner the night before, my host had invited me to stay an extra day to explore the city, an invitation that I couldn't pass up. That afternoon we set out on our bikes into the relatively small city of Richmond. To the observation deck, to downtown, to several parks, I soaked it all in, enjoying my tour of Virginia's capital. We finished the day with a chicken and pasta dinner before I turned in for the night. Before hitting the road on Tuesday, my host helped me out by replacing my rear brake pads and checking over the bike. An avid cyclist himself, he even accompanied me a dozen miles along the Virginia Capitol Trail before heading back toward Richmond. I was able to keep on the trail for another dozen miles before my path took me to Route 301 South. It ran parallel to I-95. It was loud but largely empty. The going was flat and I made great time. Somewhere along the way, I passed my 1,000th mile since starting the trip. I finished my day in Emporia, Virginia. The next day was sunny and hot, and even though it was a relatively short day and an easy ride, I could feel myself flagging early on. I was passing through North Carolina's countryside. Trees were becoming less and less common, and I found myself surrounded by large fields. Tired by my long ride the day before, I was excited when I arrived at my host's house in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I left on Thursday after a great breakfast and some local advice concerning my route. Originally, I had planned on reaching Mount Olive, about 65 miles away. However, because of Friday's very windy forecast, I decided to go the next town over in order to make my Friday a bit easier. That in mind, I got on Route 117, a much busier road that took me most of the way to Mount Olive. After stopping for dinner, I set out for the 20 miles to Warsaw. My path took me on deserted country roads that were a real treat after a full day on Route 117. I did get chased by dogs a few times, but nothing too scary. I was able to settle in for the night just as the sun was setting. After breakfast in the baseball dugout, I set out towards Delco, a 60-mile ride away. Early on in the day, I passed through pockets of wind, but nothing too substantial. I made decent time, and by noon I was 30 miles in. Google Maps took me onto a surface road of sorts, which unfortunately became sandy, resulting in me pushing my bike a mile through the woods before I got back to the roads. Once out, the wind picked up and slowed my progress to a crawl. Despite being on completely flat roads, I was only going 5 to 7 miles an hour. The last 15 miles seemed to take forever, but eventually I reached Delco and after dinner found a secluded spot for the night. I was excited to set out on Saturday, my destination being Myrtle Beach State Park, South Carolina. Everything was great for the first 9 miles, until Google Maps once again led me onto dirt roads that ran for miles and miles through undeveloped land. I was delayed for about 5 miles, as I slowly made my way through to the roads. Once out, I decided to stick to the pavement from there, trading the sand and muddy trails for the hectic ride on Route 17. Because of the unpleasant nature of the ride, the remaining 60 miles seemed to last a lot longer than they should have. But finally, I reached Myrtle Beach, and with it, the crowds. It was oddly funny to see so many people after having spent the last few days cycling through deserted North Carolinian fields. After slowly getting through the main strip on Ocean Boulevard, I arrived in Myrtle Beach State Park, where I found my spot and set up my tent for the next 2 nights. After getting settled in, I biked up the road a couple miles to get dinner, as well as some supplies for the next day and the week ahead, before returning to the park for the night. I spent Sunday checking out the beach before riding up the road to the local theater, where I watched Avengers Endgame. It was a fairly low-key day, and I enjoyed my downtime camping out at the park, resting up before my week ahead when I'll make my push to Florida.